Hey, there we are. Welcome to the Football Outsiders Radio Hour on Twitch. Football Outsiders Radio Hour, not always an hour, never on the radio, but always with a lot of good football talk. I am Aaron Schatz, the editor-in-chief of Football Outsiders. I'd like to welcome all of our viewers at twitch.tv/FB Outsiders, as well as anybody watching after the fact on YouTube or listening to us via podcast. Thanks for welcoming us back after a 2-week break. One of those weeks was supposed to be a break because I was on vacation, and one of those weeks was a mistaken break because we forgot to record the show. But we're back now, and I've got my guests here, Mike Tanier and Scott Spratt from Football Outsiders. I'd like to welcome you both to the show, back to the show. And this is important because this is Mike's first show after we've announced that Mike is now, for the first time, full-time Football Outsiders employee. Mike has been writing for the site since 2004 and is now a full-time Football Outsiders writer for the first time. Mike, welcome to the family, like to the inner circle of the family.
It is so tough to break into this industry. I was a young pup in 2004. I submitted some things to Aaron Schatz. Here I am 16 years later with my gray bristly beard, and I finally get hired. In between, I did absolutely nothing of substance, but I'm happy to be here. Scott, you had hair when you first met Aaron. Is that correct?
I did. I was going to say congrats on breaking in when you were like 14 years old. I mean, I'm just guessing right now that you're in your mid to upper 30s. So, yeah. I mean, that's really impressive.
Yeah. My cholesterol might be in the mid to upper 30s, but it's good. It's great to be here, and it's an exciting day. The preseason schedule was just announced.
Oh yes, the preseason schedule with the new. So I guess now a little bit of space between the last game and the start of the regular season, and cut downs every week after each set of games. Right. It's interesting because they announced the national television. And they are televising 2 week 2 games on ESPN. And then a week 3, 1 game on Fox and 1 game on CBS. And I thought that was interesting because my expectation was that the new preseason, week 2, would become what used to be week 3, right? That week 2 would be the so-called dress rehearsal. Right. And that week 3 would now be the future gas pumpers of Tallahassee. I wonder if the fact that CBS and Fox are getting week 3 games signifies that they don't think that that's going to be the case. Because I have a feeling they're going to be sorely mistaken, and that the week 3 is going to be the week that's all backups, and week 2 is going to be the only week that has starters playing.
They may be right, although I think one of the main things is, when does the college football season start? When are the kickoff classics? Because that's what the television networks don't want to sully up, like the Labor Day weekend and things like that with preseason football. They're going to want those big college games. So whichever week we're talking about is the one before college football has their kickoff classics and all, that's probably the one where they're going to load it with a lot of NFL preseason games.
I was going to say that, I mean, they're televising the schedule release in prime time. So, I mean, clearly they think that you'll watch whatever football product they put on the air. So why not be PJ Walker on Fox?
Historically, though, they've always done the thing of preseason football. Let's get the Patriots on 3 times in the preseason. And let's put Tom Brady on the picture, on the logo, like when we're advertising the game during How I Met Your Mother and Young Sheldon. And, so it's never about like, well, logically, you as an informed fan, no, you're not going to be watching Tom Brady. You're going to be watching, Ryan Mallett back in the day, or, whoever the poor Stidham kid or whoever it was. So they never look at it and say, hey, you want to see a rookie quarterback? Let's put that on the primetime game. It's always some team that they sort of want to market, like, because they're a well-known team, not because they're going to play interesting players that week.
Yeah, Tampa Bay would actually be interesting to see in the preseason, in that they have Kyle Trask and like no depth. So it's interesting to see Kyle Trask, and will also be interesting that they have no depth. But yeah, I agree with you. Like the preseason, what I want to see are teams like Tampa, by the way, teams that have young top rookie quarterbacks as their backups. I want to see Minnesota. I want to see Chicago if Fields ends up being the backup. I want to see Tampa Bay. I want to see Houston.
The Panthers, Sam Darnold, all the exciting players. Got it.
Well,
You gotta keep throwing those Panthers in.
Against,
a lot of Panthers talk before we came on, you folks. You missed it, and you should thank us for missing.
We're gonna get to the Panthers. We're gonna get to the NFC South. We're gonna get to the Julio Jones trade. We talk first. First of all, Mike, I just want you to know you are loved in the chat. Reuter NFL says we love Mike in a platonic way. You are loved. I'll bet you that's Chad Reuter. So hi, Chad, if that's you.
I hope so. I love you, Chad, in a fraternal way.
We should talk about all the stuff that's going on at Football Outsiders. If you're listening to this as a podcast, if you're watching us on Twitch, you're hopefully a regular Football Outsiders readers. So along with announcing Mike's sort of full-time status, we announced a ton of changes and updates yesterday. So I want to kind of talk about some of those. The big first one is team pages. We now have specific team pages for every team that have like a small summary of what's going on with that team and links to the top player pages from that team, and what we now call the DVOA grades. DVOA grades are take DVOA and turn them into a grade from A to F, so it's easier to understand. You don't have to worry about whether 30% is really good or kind of good and what 5% is or minus 20%. We're just going to turn it into a grade from A to F to help you understand. I want to thank Nickum. It went away there, but for subscribing. We're going to be adding postseason finally into the DVOA database. That's coming soon. A big deal is the return of the loser league. We are bringing back the loser league this year, a more intricate loser league where you'll pick a team every week, new players every week to pick your best losers, and the winner each week is going to win a prize, and then the big overall grand prize loser is going to win a trip to the Super Bowl. I don't know, am I allowed to call it that on Twitch? I don't know where you have to call it the big game. Gonna win a trip to the big game and a chance to meet me, Aaron Schatz, your favorite Twitch host, if you win the loser league. So we're really psyched about bringing the loser league back. Shout out to Ian Dembski, if he's out there, creator of the loser league, original writer of Scramble for the Ball back in 2003. But we are really psyched for the return of the loser league. And then the other big new change, we haven't been able to introduce them yet, but I'm going to let Scott go through all of the expanded fantasy football data that we're going to have. Scott, you're in charge of all of this. You're doing all this expanded fantasy football data.
Yeah, I mean, hypothetically, I'm going to do it, but I actually have to get through my almanac stuff. So I'm getting to it as quickly as I can. But the general idea is you're going to have some FO plus pages that let you do filtered type searches to look at which players are getting a lot of carries, a lot of targets, getting good shares of the available possible touchdowns, a lot of things like that that help you sort of decide how productive players are going to be in fantasy going forward, whether or not that's turned into actual touchdowns or actual whatever receptions so far this season. There's going to be about 7 or 8 of those that I think are going to probably be very helpful and allow you to do some really cool filtering searches.
I saw someone was writing about the Stanley Cup playoffs on Twitter and talked about expected goals and the rise sort of in analytics circles in every sport of sort of expected such and such stats. They're very useful stats to figure out when opportunity turns into reality, because a lot of times opportunity is more predictive than the actual outcomes. And I think for fantasy football, that's definitely the case. There's a lot of times in which opportunity is more predictive than outcome. And Scott's stats are now going to be available on FO Plus that are going to list a lot of opportunity rather than just outcome. I should mention also, by the way, they're going to be available at a lowered price. So that's the biggest part of the change and all the stuff we're adding. The new lowered prices for Football Outsiders FO Plus. It is now $4.99 a month for an annual subscription, or $9.99 a month if you want a monthly subscription. And that includes access to the digital version of Football Outsiders Almanac 2021, as well as all the historical digital almanacs, and the Kubiak Fantasy Football Projection System for the preseason, and all of Scott's fantasy projections weekly during the season, and all of that data for fantasy football that we're going to be putting up, and all of the expanded player pages and team pages and the old DVOA stats and all that stuff that's in FO Plus is going to now be $4.99 a month with an annual subscription, and it's 50% off through July 1st. So if you've never subscribed to FO Plus, this is the time to do it. It's just $250 a month for the next year if you subscribe before July 1st.
That's cheaper than Paramount Network. You could get all of us, or you can get all of old Star Trek and all the kind of crappy new Star Trek. Or you can get all of our new material here. You know, that is an unbelievably fair price. I would ask you for a Patreon. I would ask you for more than that. I'd send you a crappy newsletter, and it would just be me being angry at the Eagles and like hungover. You get the entire Football Outsiders database and all the power and all these new things that we're bringing in for an incredible low price.
Expanded, all kinds of expanded football stats, or an entire history of John Tester screaming at bar owners on Paramount Plus. Like, that is your options out there. So Chad Reuter says he smells a deal. And if he smells a deal, you know there's a deal out there. So we will definitely, we're looking to add a lot of really cool stuff to FO Plus. We've lowered the price of FO Plus. We really want to expand how many people are doing FO Plus. So check that out at footballoutsiders.com, all the new stuff that we're doing. Let's talk football. The big move of this week, which came down while I was on vacation having lunch, was Julio Jones traded to the Tennessee Titans for a second and a conditional fourth. The condition has to do with, like, it's something like it's either going to be one of those compensatory picks, or it's going to be a regular pick, depending on whether Tennessee has a compensatory pick or not, whatever. It's a second and a fourth, which are probably going to be a low second and a low fourth if Tennessee is as good as people expect. What was the response from you guys when you heard about the trade? Did you feel like Atlanta got enough? Were you surprised that Tennessee got Jones for just a second and a fourth? Are you surprised other teams weren't in on this? What was your thought?
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I mean, I think it's a good deal for Tennessee. I wasn't surprised by the compensation because, you know, you look at the overall, you know, the cap hit of a guy and an age of a guy like Julio, et cetera. And you're like, well, that's it. Teams at this point are not going to invest the first in him for a variety of reasons. And I like the pick for Tennessee, but, you know, with a reservation, we've been talking a lot about in the Almanac about how Tennessee was this team that has a low projection.
Yeah, comparative to what people expect for them or what their record was last year, they have a low projection because they were only 14th in DVOA last year, despite being 11-5. During the regular season, they were 7-2 in one-score games.
Right, and those are all like red flags. And I've been working, like I said, I've been working with you guys for many, many years. We know that often turns into a disappointing season. So the million miles up view of this is, okay, you're an 11-win team. You're on the verge of a Super Bowl. You need a missing piece to your offense. You grab the missing piece to the offense. So on all of that, it's like, it makes sense. So it makes sense, obviously, within the building for Tennessee to do these things. When you look at it in this more analytical line, it's like, here's a team that probably was overvalued, that's just added an older player. And, you know, does this mean they're a team that like treads water now and like is able to return to 11-5 because of Julio, or is on its way to, you know, an 8-win season or something like that? And is now just, you know, it's a different view, I think, when you look at it a little bit more granularly. That said, what's the alternative for Tennessee? Like, oh, you know what? Our projection for DVOA says we're going to fall off. So let's just give up and not go out and get a player like Julio Jones. So again, it makes sense for the organization. I'm not sure what its impact's going to be.
But yeah, I actually think I like it more for Tennessee than it seems like you might, Mike, because I feel like Tennessee is doing what the Falcons aren't doing, which is kind of choosing a lane. You're either going for it now or you're not going for it now. And Tennessee, yes, they're flawed. Yes, they have a bad defense, but the way they have Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill locked up on the salaries that they do, it kind of forces them to go in. And I think this is a move that kind of makes sense for that window, having him as an older player. You know, from a compensation standpoint, I do feel like sometimes people forget that the NFL is a hard cap league. You see someone like DeAndre Hopkins say that, you know, first rounders aren't as good as Julio and I are. We know, but, you know, you carry a contract with you. And I think only about half the teams could even fit Julio in their salary cap as is. The Falcons couldn't do it and afford to pay their rookies and get under the cap, so they couldn't keep them. But yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense for Tennessee in that respect. And so it's a worthwhile gamble. Hopefully their defense will be better. Defenses do, you know, regress more year to year than offense, right?
Yeah. They got guys on defense too. They went out and got guys. So we talk about picking a lane. They went all in. They got Autry. They got Bud Dupree. And like we can talk about, Bud Dupree is the cleanup sack guy after the other guys in Pittsburgh, whatever. They got guys on defense, so they've addressed all of their problems. So you're an 11-win team that addressed your problems. That's what you do, and that's how you succeed in the NFL. So, you know.
Yeah. Thank you to AC Cook for gifting tier 1 subs to the FB Outsiders community. Really appreciate that. Matt Noskow asks, Scott, what sort of fantasy impact do you think this makes for the skill players on both teams? Is this where we get to have the Almighty Zacchaeus discussion?
Oh man, that's a deep cut there. But no, it's not, because nobody playing fantasy cares about him.
Deep cut. He's like the third wide receiver now for them. Like
behind Kyle Pitts. Is Kyle Pitts the number 1 or the number 2 wide receiver?
I just moved Almighty Zacchaeus into the main section of Football Outsider player comments.
And Ridley's got a foot injury. He might be number 1 right now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, this is bad news for Julio Jones's fantasy value, and it's bad news for AJ Brown's fantasy value, because the Titans are a run-first offense and the Falcons weren't. So, I mean, they're going to get fewer targets, even if they're getting a bigger percentage of the targets from the Titans' perspective. So, I think the biggest fantasy winner is honestly Ryan Tannehill, a player that, you know, despite the lower volume, has had a lot of success the last couple of years, mostly by having, you know, good play action. Is it luck? I don't know. If you keep out kicking your peripherals, is it luck? I don't know. But to me, he's the big winner, while the 2 wide receivers themselves are losers. Maybe Calvin Ridley gets a small bump. I'm not sure there's a second Falcons receiver that I think, you know, really bumps up here. Russell Gage, being a slot player, I think is a little bit less impacted by Julio's presence than you would expect.
I think it's definitely like the Kyle Pitts. Can Kyle Pitts actually have value as a first-year tight end discussion is really heavily dependent on the fact that they don't have anyone else to throw to. Like it really is like how much would Kyle Pitts have to struggle to not put up numbers this year?
Right.
I mean, is Hayden Hurst he's not that bad, is he? I mean,
no, he's good. Yeah. He's good, but Pitts is just more of a downfield threat.
Sure. He's definitely the most talented. I don't know. I mean, what do we think Arthur Smith is going to change about the Falcons offense that's been kind of more extreme than anybody except maybe the Steelers in terms of a pass focus, with Mike Davis, maybe a more Derrick Henry type of player, in that he succeeds after contact, if not nearly that good? Like, is this just going to become a lower passing volume, play action focused offense? I don't know. What do you make of that, Mike?
I'm here for the Mike Davis, because he broke a few tackles in a couple of games last year, being Derrick Henry. I don't know. I have erased the Falcons from my brain. The moment Julio was out of there, like even that whole thing while we used to do with the Falcons, will they clear the over or not? Will they lose in the fourth quarter? I'm really not thinking about them that much. I'm guessing it's going to be 2 tight end, obviously, because of the 2 tight ends they've got there. And I'm guessing it's going to be pretty terrible overall, because you talked about picking a lane earlier. They've not picked a lane. They've got this veteran quarterback in a play out the string mode with an ginormous contract. And I think it's going to be palliative for most of the year. So yeah, Ridley stats, that's great. You know, Kyle Pitts stats for fantasy, that's great. I'm looking at my app here, and they've got the over under for wins for the Titans at 9.5 for the Titans, 9.5. I could go either way with that. The over-under for Atlanta for wins is still 7.5. Even a 17 game season, trying to wrap my brain around, I cannot find 7.5 wins for the Atlanta Falcons as currently constructed.
Atlanta is the opposite of Tennessee in that Atlanta like very much underperformed last year, but given what's happened with the roster over the offs, I'm with you. I think I go under the 7.5. By the way, Jay Molnar 94 says, are they actually going to use Kyle Pitts as a tight end? He's basically a wide receiver. Well, he may run a lot of wide receiver routes, but he's going to run them from the slot. And for the fantasy football discussion, what matters is he's going to be listed as a tight end in fantasy football.
Right.
The problem is the Falcons aren't really bad because Matt Ryan's offenses have finished in the top half of the league 11 of his 13 seasons. So they're not bad enough to get another quarterback, which is why the Pitts pick was such a strange move. Again, this is the 1 foot in the competitive lane, 1 foot in the rebuilding lane.
I've been thinking about that too. Like it really is weird. If they knew they were going to have to get rid of Julio Jones, they probably should have just blown it up and started over. And the right way to blow it up and start over would have been to trade Matt Ryan to someone like Denver.
Well,
and then to draft Justin Fields.
I don't think they could have done that. He carried like a $70 million cap figure. It's like
that's hard to trade.
They had to stretch him. Again, this is another thing they had to do because of bad moves in the past. Stretch his contract to even fit him in their cap and pay their rookies again. But you like that cap figure becomes much more tenable in 2023. I know it seems dumb. You like draft Justin Fields and then sit him for a year, maybe a year and a half. But what is their alternative? They're not going to be bad enough to get a good quarterback for a few years unless they do a Bears type trade.
You draft Fields and you sit him for a year, and then you cut Ryan when it's all just cap dump a year from now. And that's kind of how you approach it. Or you try to find some weird trade partner and hope something breaks out. That's the best way to do it. And it's easy to do out here, on Twitch. And it's hard to do when you're in the organization and you have people who've invested 13 years in working with Matt Ryan and saying, we're going to do this Machiavellian route. I think they should have considered it, but I understand why they didn't do it. But now they're in this predicament where, you're right. There's a very good chance that we went 7-10 because Ryan was adequate and the defense played better than expected and everything. Now, where's your quarterback of the future? Where's your quarterback of the future? You still don't have an avenue to get one.
Thank you to Sinister One for following us. And Jay Molnar makes a good point, by the way, about that, which is don't forget the owner is 100 years old and probably didn't want to do a young quarterback and a restart. I don't think he's 100 years old, but you do. It's funny because you talk about like GMs who are in their, who are in prove-it years. They don't want to pick up young quarterbacks and restart the whole cycle.
Right.
You never think about owners that way. Like, are there owners who are like, okay, we need to win now because like I'm tired of sitting around. Like we need to win now.
The Bears owner, Virginia McCaskey, isn't she 98? So I mean, she was willing to draft Justin Fields.
Yeah. Leon Hess, when he hired Rich Kotite in 1990, whatever, for the Jets, basically said, I'm 82 years old. I want to win a championship. And in Jets tradition, that meant going and getting Rich Kotite to be your head coach. So they do think like that. I know Arthur Blank thinks in terms of it being a family organization. He really talks in that in that terminology and likes considering himself sort of a marquee owner who's not going to like do something Machiavellian and cut guys loose for reasons like that. So I can see him thinking that way. Never underestimate the coach and GM, the other side of it, the new ones, new hires. Love the red shirt year of saying, we're going to have to need the first year. We really just have to clean up the mess of the last guy so that they can keep expectations low for another year. So you'll see that with like really bad quarterbacks. Of course, you'll take a mulligan year with Matt Ryan and then be like, oh, you know what? Now we really have to go seek that quarterback of the future. You can see Arthur Smith, the new regime, thinking that way.
Yeah, but again, with Matt Ryan at quarterback, they're not going to totally suck. They're going to be okay. And it's probably they're going to end up picking like 7th next year, which, I mean, Justin Fields went in that area. So you could get a quarterback if you're picking 7th or 8th, but you're not going to get the top quarterback.
Right. Could the Falcons win the division if Brady got hurt, though?
I mean, based on our projections, the most likely winner of that division, if something happens to Tampa Bay, is New Orleans. And this is where we could just get into talking about the whole NFC South, because New Orleans is going to have one of the top defenses in the league if our projections come out right. And so the fact that the offense is nowhere, not going to be as good as it was last year they're still going to be good on special teams and really good on defense. So, I mean, we have them second in the division.
Well, you can get Falcons to win the NFC South plus 800 right now.
Well, I mean, Aaron mentioned earlier how little depth the Bucs had, and people didn't notice that last year because I think they had the fewest adjusted games lost in football. They were either 1 or 2, right? And
yep, number 1.
Vita Vea was really the only significant player they lost, and he got back in time to make an impact later in the postseason. So that's a lot of things going right for a team that, while they're not an older team per se, apart from Brady, that's just, you hardly ever see teams consistently beat the odds from a injury luck perspective. I don't know.
Right. I mean, if something happens to Brady, yeah, you know, and if something happens to Matt Ryan, then the Falcons disappear. And so you can do that. But I just wanted to go through the odds again. So plus 800. If you really want to gamble for the NFC South, it's plus 1,100 to win a division for your Carolina Panthers.
Yeah. If only we didn't have the least exciting quarterback in the league. So prepping for the show, I tried to make a case that maybe the Matt Rule, Scott Fitterer group was really good at, identifying diamonds in the rough, these like distressed assets. But I think it's actually just Robbie Anderson so far. So I don't think I can make that claim.
It really is. I mean, it really is such an amazing gamble. They're really taking a colossal gamble that Adam Gase was that bad that he made Darnold look that horrible the last couple of years. Because This is a guy who's been at the bottom of the league and whose numbers got worse every year for his first 3 years.
Right.
Well, which team do you think made the bigger mistake not taking Justin Fields, the Falcons or the Panthers?
Oh, that's
I mean,
the Panthers. I think the Panthers, because the Falcons do still have Ryan, and because it was a higher pick, and like the further down Fields got, the more of an issue it was that you weren't taking him.
Right. That's a good point. Like, here it is, an opportunity sitting in your lap. You don't have a lot invested in the quarterback position. You are supposed to be a rebuilding team. And you say, yeah, we go with Sam Darnold.
I mean,
Sam Darnold, Will Greer, we're fine. And all the Temple Owls, all the 2016 Temple Owls, you can shake a stick at.
If Darnold is not good, then the Panthers have a much easier path to getting a real rebuilding quarterback, though.
Right. Yeah. Jay Molnar says the team that made the biggest mistake by not getting Fields is the Broncos.
Yeah.
Unless the Broncos end up with Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson, if I can even say that.
Yeah, Kareem Jackson this week came out and said that Deshaun Watson personally told him that he wants to play for the Denver Broncos. I have no idea if that's true or not. I'm sure Deshaun Watson is happy to tell any of his friends who play for any of the other 31 teams how much he wants to play for that team that is not the Houston Texans.
Yeah. Or how about maybe Matt Ryan? He'll be the Broncos quarterback in a year or two, and then problem solved.
He's tall, and he is a pocket passer. And John Elway might see a little bit of John Elway in him. And those are the three characteristics of a good Broncos quarterback. Yeah, I lost a lot of Super Bowls too there, Matt. Then I won some. Come win some with me. I could see Elway going into that mode.
I honestly could see that. If Rodgers doesn't go somewhere, I could totally see Matt Ryan in Denver. That would work.
I could see like a line of every veteran quarterback just like walking into the office to talk to Elway, and then doing like a reality TV show to see who's going to be the Broncos quarterback.
Or just think about it, time like 2 or 3 years of Matt Ryan, and then 2 or 3 years of Ryan Tannehill, and then.
Well, the problem is, are they going to be fighting the Bucs for those retiring quarterbacks? Because again, like they're just a set up, and they're
no, because Brady will still be playing in 6 years. So the Bucs aren't going to have to replace him forever because he's never ever going to retire, and Father Time is never ever going to get him.
Oh man, you've ingested too much Boston media, sir.
Yeah, well, either that or it's just bitterness about the fact that, one of the reasons the Patriots allowed him to leave was the idea that, well, eventually he's going to have to age. And guess what? That didn't happen yet.
Right.
If it makes you feel better, he would not have won a Super Bowl with your team last year.
I don't think he would have come close. It was funny. Last year, there were people like, how on earth could the Patriots have gotten rid of Brady Like we would have been in the Super Bowl if Brady was here. And it's like, do you look around the rest of the team? Like, first of all, look at who the receivers are. Second of all, look at what has happened to your defense. Do you really think that they would have won something if Brady had stayed here? No, they would have been 9-7 if Brady had stayed here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how like an NFC South conversation ended up being about the Patriots, but that's just football for you these days.
Well, it's Tampa Bay, man. I mean, that the new Tampa Bay New England connection is that, you know, with Gronk down there and Brady down there, and when Edelman, despite the fact that Edelman's knees are shot, when Edelman said he was retiring, everyone's response was, he's not retiring, he's going to Tampa. So I will say it's funny because I was just in Tampa. That's where I was last weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Sarasota, but we flew in and out of Tampa. They have these billboards all over Tampa that say Super Bowl champions that aren't actually advertising anything. Like, I don't know who bought the billboards. They're not advertising any products. It just says Super Bowl champions with the Tampa Bay logo. I don't know whether the team just bought them to celebrate or what, but it's like just to remind everybody who's driving on the highway that they won the thing.
Yeah, put on your Roddy Piper They Live glasses, and you'll see it's a TB12 subliminal advertisement. You looked at that, said, that's interesting. I need a damn kale smoothie right now, and I can only get it from one brand.
I was going to say that explains why, you know, here I was on vacation and I went and bought avocado ice cream. I could have bought real ice cream, but no, something was in my head. I don't know what it was.
So something I love about Brady is he seems to have the sixth sense of which division to get in to really ease his road to the Super Bowl. And it was a little less obvious, I think, going to the Buccaneers. But now that you're staring at it, you're like, man, could he be in any better situation? Right. This kind of came up to me, even looking for the Saints, actually. Here is the dead cap situation in the NFC South right now. The Bucs, 2.2 million. That's the third lowest. And then the Falcons, Panthers, and Saints are all in the top six with at least $20 million in dead cap.
Right.
I mean, these other teams, they're in various states of rebuilding or denial about the need to rebuild. And the Bucs have an unbelievable path to the Super Bowl for the next 2 years if Brady can stick it out that long.
The Bucs were the only team that really went after signing him. So I don't know how much I want to reward him for picking them, but if he did pick them, it was smart because he recognized that, but he also recognized all the talent that they had, not just on offense, but on defense, that like just needed the star quarterback to have it all gel.
And that's the Broncos argument, right?
Yeah, that's the Broncos argument right now.
No, legitimately.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. If Tom Brady came on, they would be a different team. It's just that where Aaron Rodgers comes on, et cetera. But they imported Sam Darnold. For Tom Brady so he could feel more comfortable this year in the NFC South. And not only that, but when Brady is not putting up those billboards, making you buy avocado ice cream, he's on Facebook being like, hey, you know what? Vaccinations cause infertility, Sam. And he's making sure that everything is working out his way.
That's just depressing.
I'm curious what you guys think about the fact that the Football Outsiders projections have the Saints so high. Like right now, it's partly because I'm projecting them with Winston as the quarterback. But even if we have Taysom Hill projected as the quarterback, they only lose like one win. I mean, you know, our averages are always really close to, well, I was going to say 8-8, but our averages are always really close to 8.5, but still, so one win is a big difference between Winston and Hill, but still like our defensive and special teams projections. I mean, special teams projection it doesn't add much. Defensive projection for them is very strong, and their offensive projection is not terrible. It's slightly below average because the fact is Winston, that 30 interception year is an exception. Like, I don't think he has another year above 20. And you have the fact that Sean Payton has a history of designing good offenses. You have Michael Thomas there. You have Alvin Kamara there. You have an offensive line with a lot of quality players and continuity. Like, there's reason to believe, I think, that the Saints are not going to completely dissolve. What do you guys think about that?
You want me to start? I mean, the Saints had a very good one-loss record with backups behind Breeze the last few years, and Teddy Bridgewater and Taysom. But maybe, I don't know if you would know this off the top of your head, Aaron, but like, were those records, were they supported by correspondingly good DVOAs?
Not as good as with Breeze.
Right. But like, I was thinking that maybe those games, those records may have been more a result of like, winning in close game situations or mucking it up or whatever, things that might not necessarily be consistent over the full season. So
that game was just throw that game out, right?
I am surprised. And to me, like the sort of the thing in my mind that sort of lives outside of maybe the DVOA projections is the interplay between offense and defense. And like Winston is a great example of this in my mind, because DVOA was screaming how good the Buccaneers defense was while Winston was the quarterback, but he kept sticking them with short fields and it completely sabotaged their chances to win. So, I mean, if Hill or Winston are significantly worse than Breeze was, I think the defense will feel that effect, even if they weren't going to be worse on a per play basis over a smaller number of plays with a good quarterback.
Yeah. I think of the Saints as the Patriots last year. Brady leaves, Breeze leaves. Defense is still strong. Defense is still strong. Cam Newton, Taysom Hill. Okay, that's a little crazy, but like, oh, we've got this option thing that we can run sometimes, whatever. I could see the same kind of season where it's like, oh, look at that close loss. Look at that close loss. Oh, we all came together and had a win here. I just don't see a particularly relevant team.
Well, except for the fact that the Patriots lost a ton of defensive talent, and we knew, like we projected that their defense was going to collapse, and it did. Right. Whereas the Saints still have all their defensive talent, and we're projecting that their defense is going to be top 5.
Right, and it's an older defense. I can see it going off that way. They've been seeing their talent kind of dissipate over the last couple of years, whereas the Patriots, it was this one big thing where a lot of people opt out. But from 1,000 miles up, that's the kind of season I'm anticipating, where they hover around 500. It's sort of a defense and ball control type thing, and we're kind of looking at like, what's the actual future at quarterback? These guys are not the actual future at quarterback. What's it going to be? I just want to throw out here, you can get action on your favorite local legal sports book in the state where it's legal on who will be the opening day starter for the New Orleans Saints at quarterback. The action right now is Jameis minus 250, Taysom plus 175, and Fighting Irish fans, Ian Book at plus 3,300.
Nice. Way to dig deep.
I'm feeling Taysom with this. I we can say the law of rational coaching. And say it's got to be Jameis, but I've seen some irrational coaching when it comes to Sean Payton. And
last year, the fact that Winston was not the quarterback when Breeze got hurt was irrational.
Right.
Well, can I make a counterpoint in Taysom's favor, or maybe in like counter to Winston's support? Okay. Which is that, I got to find this real quick. But so the Saints last year in Taysom Hill's starts, it was 4 weeks. 47.9% success rate. In Breeze's starts, 52.7%. That difference is 4.8%. Obviously, Breeze being the better passer. But then look at the Buccaneers over the last 2 years. Jameis's offense 2 years ago, or in 2019, 43.2%. With Brady last year, 48%. That difference, exactly the same, 4.8%. Like, I know that it looks completely different, but even choosing a stat like success rate, which doesn't, really heavily penalize a player for throwing interceptions and that type of stuff like Winston would. Both of these guys sort of shepherded the same offensive decline with their teams, going from a really good Hall of Fame quarterback as each other. So why are you so convinced that Winston is the better quarterback? Isn't he just more conventional?
Well, because Brady 2020 is a lot better than Breeze 2020.
Is that why?
Yeah.
And Taysom, I mean, I watched every single snap of those games. I can see the logic.
He got away with some, like there was a ball to Emmanuel Sanders that goes as a long gain in the stats.
Let me cut you off.
Up there like crazy floating.
Let me cut you off. I'm not arguing that Taysom is as good as Winston. I'm arguing that Winston is as bad as Hill.
Well, and you can, and that's an argument I can listen to. Absolutely. Especially, Sean Payton is watching training camp. And if he's watching Jameis and saying, "Yeah, I'm going to stick with Taysom here," that's got to mean something somewhere along the way. He went with Teddy Bridgewater 2 years ago.
What Payton should do is make it an open competition every week and never announce who the starter is going to be before game time. And that way, defenses would just have a total nightmare trying to prepare for 2 completely disparate quarterbacks.
Right.
I wouldn't be shocked if that's what he does. And they each start like 8 games. It would not surprise me.
And Ian Book starts the 17th.
Just for fun. Ian Book is, like we were talking on the draft shows, like he was the biggest head scratcher draft pick of the year.
Mhm.
Like people were like anybody who's a draftnik had him as basically undraftable. And the fact that they took him in what was it, like the fourth round?
Fourth round,
It's
I
just
believe.
everybody's just scratching their heads like, what the hell?
Mhm. And I kind of like them more than the other draft picks, but you see it. It's kind of like pepper armed scrambly guy. So if you're looking for someone to back up Taysom Hill, it's actually Ian Book to that degree. But yeah, as a fourth round pick, that's not. I think what really happened was there was a run on all those second tier meh quarterbacks that kind of came through. They got the Stanford guy, and then Vikings got
Kellen
Mond,
Mond.
dude. The Chris Sims
Davis
thought was
Mills.
great. Right. So you got Davis Mills. So like everybody, oh well, now's the time. It's a run on like the other quarterbacks. So they grabbed the guy there. I don't necessarily understand it because you're either committed to this Jason, like you either think that Taysom really is some kind of quarterback of the future, or you found the diamond in the rough in Taysom, or you need an actual quarterback solution. And it's like now you got 2 half measures, and I guess Ian Book's like 1/8 of a measure. I'm
going to wait until I have any kind of grasp on how to evaluate a college quarterback from a pro perspective until I criticize any quarterback pick. Like I don't think I have any idea which rookie quarterbacks are going to be good. And I'm not sure teams really do either.
Thank you to Overfloater8 for subscribing. Appreciate that. M. Nosco says, is there a bigger X factor in the division than Saints quarterback? I don't think so. There's Bucks health. And there's, does Sam Darnold truly suck, or can Joe Brady get something out of him? But I think Saints quarterback is the biggest X factor in the division.
Well, I guess it depends on how you would define X factor. Like, how likely does it have to happen for it to be an X factor? Because if Sam Darnold was good, I think that would be transformative for the Panthers. I just don't think that's very likely.
Yeah. I also don't know if that's transformative for them this year, or it's like now we have found a quarterback and we can complete our rebuild. Like Sam Darnold is good, and now we can finish the job we're trying to do here. Whereas with the Saints, it's like we have discovered average quarterbacking out of James, or gotten back some of Jameis's luster from a couple of years ago. That really does keep them in a Super Bowl conversation.
If their defense is what we think their defense will be, then absolutely it does.
Right.
I should go back to Julio Jones here. We had a really cool Julio Jones graphic, and we blew right past it when we were talking about Julio Jones. So I'm going to go back to talking just a little bit about Julio Jones, and because then we can talk about the Falcons and who the hell is going to play receiver for them. But Julio Jones, just to point out how good he is, Julio Jones had 6 straight years in the top 7 of our DYAR stats from 2014 to 2019. Until he fell to 16th last year because of injuries, and he was still number 2 in DVOA. DVOA, of course, is per play, and DYAR is total value. So, of course, Jones was lower in total value last year because he missed games with injury, but he was still really awesome in per play value. So, like, Julio Jones has not lost anything. Right. And I went and looked at what routes he runs the most. He ran the most curls of any player in the league in 2019, and Tennessee was second in DVOA on curls last year. So it seems like a pretty nice match of player with scheme, assuming that they're still going to be running the same scheme, even though they have a new offensive coordinator.
And I feel like curl is the veteran quarterback, and you have the receiver that is going to get a lot of off coverage. And the combination results in a lot of curls. And I think you saw that with Atlanta. Ryan's going to be able to complete those. There's going to be off coverage on Ridley and Julio, so you get those plays. I think Tanier as a veteran quarterback, who's been playing very well lately, I think that falls into the same line there. I was doing some stuff for the almanac on curls, and it was Dalton that had 1 million curls. Now, part of that is McCarthy. He only has 6 plays in the playbook, et cetera. But it's like, Amare, CD, and Gallup, we go out. They got soft coverage on them. Now, keep in mind also, a lot of times that soft coverage is, you're up by 17 points and you're sagging into like a cover 3 or a quarters coverage in front of these guys. And that was the case a lot for the Falcons and for the Cowboys. But, it's still, you're right. It speaks to the idea this is a system fit. He's going to have some opportunities there, and he's going to be able to catch some short passes.
We're already running a graphic in the book of Arizona's limited route tree. We should run one of Dallas's limited route tree and just be able to compare them.
Oh, I want to see the graphic. You got to let me see that.
I'll have to send that to you. It's Vince's chapter. The Arizona is done, so I'll have to send you the graphic.
It's like a trips bunch formation to the left, because it's always to the left with DeAndre Hopkins. And, there's basically, I guess, two people running across or in front of DeAndre. And that's Cliff Kingsbury. That's the guru of the Big 12. And that's what they were running about 37 times a game.
So the thing about Julio Jones is, and I don't know, Scott, if you have more Julio, do you have more Julio stats you want to share? As long as we come here to praise Julio Jones.
Well, I mean, I had a lot of stuff prepped as a sad Panthers fan about Julio. I don't know if we want to get into that or not.
Sure, hit it.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, I was absolutely floored to see that Julio didn't have more DYAR against the Panthers than any other team. The Bucks, it was actually the most for them, 475, but the Panthers were in second with 321. But the Panthers were responsible for two of Julio's two biggest DYAR games so far, and they were in quick succession. The first was back in week 16 of 2015. The Falcons won 20-13. Jones had 178 yards, and that was the only loss the Panthers suffered in that 2015 season when they went to the Super Bowl and then eventually lost there to the Broncos. And I was pretty sure that was going to be the only chance the Cam Newton Panthers had to get to a Super Bowl. I think I actually told you that on our previous podcast, Aaron. But I wanted some time to kind of come to grips with it. But instead, week 4 the next year, the Falcons beat the Panthers 48-33, and Julio had 300 yards on 12 catches.
Wow.
No other Falcons receiver had more than 49 yards in that game. That game was so bad that the Panthers released cornerback Ben Wickery after it, basically ended his career. And that was coming on the heels of the Panthers kind of inexplicably rescinding Josh Norman's franchise tag in that offseason and letting him leave for Washington. So it was like, hey, the Panthers lost the Super Bowl, and guess what? It's the whole era is kind of over immediately. And Julio Jones, I kind of blame him. I'm glad that he is out of the division.
That was really a one-year blip, wasn't it? Like, that team did not gradually build over time. Like, they suddenly had one great year, and then that was it.
It was a real unusual confluence of positive factors, from like one of the easiest schedules in the league, one of Newton's healthy seasons when there weren't really that many, and guys like Josh Norman popping up that had really limited runs of excellence.
So fun to watch, though.
Yeah,
it was so fun to watch. But yeah, it was fleeting.
So have you done new projections with Julio Jones in Tennessee? Do we have new Kubiaks yet? Or are you still working on that?
No, that's a little bit on the back burner, but I'll be getting to that. But as mentioned, I'm pretty confident he's going to end up with fewer projected fantasy points just based on volume.
Yeah, because it really gets to the question, like I said, like, who replaces him in Atlanta? Like, there's no replacement. There's Ridley and Pitts. I mean, Russell Gage Russell Gage might become draftable in deep leagues. And then, like I said, the third receiver I would think is now Olamide Zaccheaus. It's either him or a guy named Christian Blake, but Zaccheaus had more usage last year. Yeah, so my thought was Zaccheaus is probably the third receiver now, which means we get to say his name all the time. And I'm probably mispronouncing it, but it's an awesome name.
I'm glad
all the minor prophets. All of the minor prophets are going to be coming on and playing for the Falcons this year. We're going to see Micah and Malachi. It's going to be amazing.
I'm glad we didn't play the game of making me try to guess the names of the other Falcons receivers.
I don't remember Zaccheaus from the Bible. That's not what I remember.
There are definitely some G names though, so I'm with Mike from that perspective.
No, looking at the depth chart on our lads, it's like Christian Blake, Zaccheaus, Cordarrelle Patterson, who we know can't really play receiver. Tajay Sharp, remember him? Used to be with Tennessee.
He was actually released by someone else within the last few weeks, right?
He was on Minnesota.
That's a recent addition.
God, yeah.
So with the Titans, I feel like the second receiver, Corey Davis, was really more of a run blocker more than anything else. So like this second job is going to be just looking for who the next Mohamed Sanu is, right? We're not talking about a fantasy relevant player, no matter who gets that job.
You mean in Atlanta?
Right, with Arthur Smith there.
Yeah, that might be true, in which case it's Gage, and maybe Gage blocks a lot. Is Gage an LSU guy? I'm trying to remember because LSU, yep, he is. I thought so. LSU guys have great reputations for wide receiver blocking.
Mm-hmm. They do.
He's small, though.
Oh, he is. He's 6 feet 180, it looks like. So, yeah, that's not too big, but that's not like tiny.
No, they can get out there and throw it around a little bit on the edge. And, and as a slot guy, a lot of times those little slot guys are blocking another little slot guy. So
Yeah.
you knock him around there. It's
And then-
amazing.
With Tennessee, I took we were projecting Des Fitzpatrick, the 4th round pick, as the 3rd receiver, and we were giving him a full comment in the book, and I took that out. I moved him to the going deep section with the Julio Jones trade because I have a feeling now he's going to be projected now for like 150 yards or something.
Right. Because you got Josh Reynolds there now too on the slot.
Yep, Josh Reynolds is now the wide receiver 3 for that team.
Right. And you always have to watch for the idea that, Arthur Smith's going to run the same system in Atlanta. Well, of course, they were running like option type stuff with Tannehill. You're not going to do that with Matt Ryan. I think, like, okay, Derrick Henry playing at the level he was playing. Yeah, we're going to feed him the ball. We're going to be more run oriented than, than you might think is optimal in the NFL nowadays. We might not do that with Mike Davis. So, I'm not sure what to expect. I do expect a lot of 12 personnel, obviously, because what they've got. But we might also just see a team that's throwing the ball out because they're behind, which means more passing opportunities for Tajay Sharp or whoever is in the lineup for the Falcons.
Yeah, I don't know. At some point, they are going to go 3 wide. I mean, even if they do 12 personnel, they're not going to do it more than half the time. So they're going to be 3 wide a lot. And I don't know who's going to be the 3rd guy, but I think it's going to be Zacchaeus.
Obadiah. Melchizedek.
I recognize that I'm in the tank for Mike Davis, and maybe that's not the right opinion to have, but why didn't the Falcons draft the running back? There were plenty
because they love Kadri Ollison.
That was definitely the most shocking name that I was giving carries to in the preparation of Kubiak. I was like, are you really? But
who is he?
He was either a 7th rounder or an undrafted player.
No, he's a 5th rounder from 2019. 2019 5th rounder.
How do I miss
Kadri Ollison? Because it's 2 years ago, and he didn't play much in his first couple seasons, and it's a running back. Like 5th round running backs are just a dime a dozen at this point.
I drank this brain cell away. Kid from Pittsburgh, huh?
But he's really more of I think he's kind of a bigger back, more of a power guy, which again, maybe that fits with the play action style that they're going to be trying to run here with Mike Davis and crew. But it seems weird that they didn't address the position more if they don't have confidence that Davis is a player. I don't know.
Well, they have confidence that Davis is a player. I mean, it makes you wonder why he was cut by 3 teams before this or whatever, but that's running backs for you. Like that's running backs for you is guys could be cut by 3 teams and then suddenly they're like superstars and then they get signed to big free agent deals or big for running back free agent deals.
Yeah, the Ollison kid had a nice career at Pitt. I don't know why I've spaced on him or whatever. He had a carry last year. He had 1. And maybe the Falcons know deep down they are a rebuilding team that is simply stuck with the albatross of Ryan right now. It's like, yeah, we're not going to invest at running back in the draft in this first year.
And it's a good albatross to have if you have to have an albatross. I mean, the contract is the albatross, not the player. The player's still good.
Right. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. And the idea that he can keep professionalism going and give other guys an opportunity to develop along the way, like Pitts, is good until you say, well, when are we going to get started on actually getting the quarterback of the future that the team is going to need if it's going to turn around and really move forward?
Yeah, I don't even think Matt Ryan's contract is the problem. It's guys more like Dante Fowler who have such huge cap figures that's what's preventing the team from making other improvements, where a lot of teams would happily pay Ryan what he's being paid right now if it were on sort of a better schedule with everything else happening.
Atlanta really is the all-name team. God, looking at their depth chart here, not only do they have Olamide Zacchaeus and Cordarrelle Patterson, that's now the home of Barkevious Mingo.
Yes.
And Foyesade Oluokun.
Nice.
The underrated linebacker, who I believe is the highest player in the Kubiak IDP projections, who I didn't find when I looked up an ADP. Like I looked up an ADP for IDP. So just average draft position for individual defensive players, just to see how it differed from my projections. And I believe that either Oluokun or Josie Jewell of Denver were the guys that I had projected a lot higher than ADP. Oluokun is the kid from Yale who every time they play him, he's like productive, but no one ever thinks about him at all.
So what you're saying is you are Foyesade's biggest fan.
I am Foyesade's biggest fan, yes.
Foyesade Hive Unite.
If I know how to, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Foyesade.
How you say?
Oluokun. Like he's actually good. He's a good player. He was a 6th round pick, and he's always produced whenever they've played him. They also have a 5th round defensive end named Adetokunbo Agundeji.
I see it. I believe it. Alini Putatawe is one of the undrafted free agents. Obviously, we can get like weird. I'm glad that they are casting a wide net. If this means they're getting more Polynesian players from other nations.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we talk about African names being funny, but in African languages, those names are normal. In no language is Barkevius Mingo normal.
Well, I mean, my big takeaway from this is I actually feel a lot worse about Mike Davis being on this team than I did a few minutes ago.
I can spell it. I'm happy. Joe Sculthorpe, guys. Joe Sculthorpe, guard.
Yeah.
Sculthorpe.
Yeah. There are good names in Atlanta, which will keep things interesting when they're going 7-10 and not getting a top 8 draft pick, but not making the playoffs on.
It's going to make me not write about them because I don't want to spell the names. I'm sorry again for folks who have non-European descent names. I'm not like if you're not kicking butt and I have an excuse to not spell it, I'm not going to type it. Sorry.
Right. Just to not only talk about non-European descent names, Hronis Grasu. I don't know what team he's on now, but that's one of the all-time names, and that's very European.
And Young Ho's their kicker.
Yes, they have Young Ho Koo.
Is it Young Ho or Young Wei?
I think it's Young Wei Koo.
Yeah.
Young Wei.
Yeah. The star onside kicker of the NFL.
Yes. Nice. Yes.
Like that is a play that I don't count at all in DVOA because it's one of those non-predictive plays. They're so rare, but he's actually got like a little bit of a history of being pretty awesome on those onside kicks.
Well, how do you have the best onside kicker in the league and then lose every close game? Like all of them in agonizing fashion.
The Falcons know the answer to this is when no one actually knows how to recover an onside kick.
Yeah.
Right.
And Julio is on the hands team being like, I don't remember what the rule, but I think I'm supposed to let it watch it bounce for a while before I get it because there's a 5-second rule or something. It's like, maybe you shouldn't be on the hands team, Julio, if no one went over it with you. Or maybe the coach should have taken you aside and had, hey, Hall of Fame wide receiver who never played special teams since 2011, whatever. Let me go over what you're supposed to do. Get the ball. Get the damn ball. You're Julio Jones. I'm sorry, I digress.
He had a pass defense a couple years ago. He was on the Hail Mary team.
Yeah,
I remember him showing up in the individual defense stats because he got a pass defense on a Hail Mary.
Yeah, he's better in the end zone as a defensive back than as a receiver, I guess, right?
That's like batted it down like he always does.
Who's the player this year? There was an offensive player who got a sack on a fake punt.
Oh my God.
Like I love those kind of random stats. I can't remember the name of the player right now.
All I remember is DK Metcalf making the sick tackle. So
Justin Watson, that's who it is. Speaking of the NFC South, Justin Watson from Tampa Bay. It was Justin Watson from Tampa Bay who had a sack on a fake punt this year. He actually was recorded. He was like the first offensive player to ever get a sack.
Since young Julian Edelman, maybe, right?
Primarily offensive player. I don't know if Edelman ever had a sack, or Troy Brown when he was playing both ways, or Mike Furley. Remember Mike Furley from the Lions? He played both ways. He played with Mike Furry, Furry. He played a season at safety, and then otherwise he was a wide receiver, so he was a both way guy. All right, so we've devolved to talking about great both way players, and that's a sign that the Football Outsiders Radio Hour is kind of over. So I want to thank again everybody who tuned in. Twitch.tv/FB Outsiders. We are here every Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And then we are posted on YouTube as well as in your favorite podcast feed, the Football Outsiders Podcast Network. So I want to thank everybody for listening. I want to thank everybody for watching, for chatting with us on Twitch. A reminder about all the cool stuff the Football Outsiders redesigned, lowered prices for FO Plus, only $250 a month for an annual subscription through July 1st, $4.99 a month for a monthly subscription through July 1st. Thank you, everybody, for watching our Twitch stream, for listening to us, and we will see you next week. Thank you, Mike Tanier and Scott Spratt, for joining me. and we will see you, or actually not see you because this camera works only one direction. You will see us next week for the Football Outsiders Radio Hour on Twitch. Thank you for watching.